بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين إخوة الإسلام عباد الله. First, I greet you all with the greetings of the people of paradise, that being Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This evening, I'm doing something new, and I don't think that I'll be on for too long. I don't think I'll be live streaming for too long, and Allah knows best. But as you can see from the title, it's action-provoking dialogue. Action-provoking dialogue. And what I hope to accomplish by this is that first, I hope that this will be the first of many discussions, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. But the point of me doing this is to talk about discussions, or to discuss issues with the hopes that it will inspire a much larger discussion on how to go about bringing things to fruition. And in reality, it'll bring about a focus on bringing things into fruition. Because what I hope to talk about, hopefully some of the things will be mentioned on how certain things can take place. Now, usually in the past with heavyweight dialogue and urban duat dialogue, there was always other participants. Walillah alhamd. Right now, due to my schedule and my schedule conflicting with others, then I'll be doing this by myself, inshallah, with the hopes that in the future, for when people are available, they can participate, inshallah. However, what I'll try to do, I'll pay attention to the comments section, and if people want to participate via the comment section, if they have something to add to the discussion, then I'll kindly read the statements, inshallah, for people that may be paying attention, until I can come up with a better way of just bringing people in, because I'm using different equipment now, and I'm not really sure how to adequately use it. So like I said, I won't be on here for too long. One, I'm traveling in the morning, inshallah. For those that don't know, I'll be in Baltimore, Maryland tomorrow, inshallah, for the Building Communities Upon Principles lectures that will be taking place there. Alongside my brother Abu Abbad Abdul Mutakabbir, likewise my brother Abu Yusuf Khalifa, and my brother Abu Zainab Tawfiq. Now, for those who may be in the Baltimore area, and this will be taking place at Masjid Baytullah, and the address is 1409 West Pratt Street, Baltimore, Maryland. For those that are not in Baltimore, then that's the address, 1409 West Pratt Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 21223. All right, zip code 21223. And so the lectures will start after Dhuhr, sometime after Dhuhr, promptly, inshallah. And so I would encourage the brothers and sisters to come out, for those who are in the area, and those who are close by, to come out and benefit from the discussion that will be taking place tomorrow, inshallah. Now, when dealing with this particular subject, because like I said, I don't want to be here for too long. Dealing with this particular, or the discussion tonight, gaining power. Gaining power. And this particular discussion, I want to deal with it from an individual perspective and likewise from a communal perspective. And I think what's important is to begin with the communal perspective first. And if we get a chance to make it into individual perspectives, then I'll deal with that as well. But one of the things that, in my personal opinion, that needs to happen as it relates to the Muslims is that we need to target areas or an area to actually establish an Islamic village. To actually establish an Islamic village, meaning a community within a community. When I say a community, I mean a real, actual community. Some people make the distinction between a community and a neighborhood. And so they state that a neighborhood is just some place where you live. Whereas a community is some place that you live and control. All your needs are within that community. You rarely have to go outside of it. And you control it, whatever group of people that you may be, you control it. You control that area. You control it by way of ownership of property. You control it by way of economics, meaning the businesses they're in or your businesses, and thus forth and so on. You control every aspect. So with that being the case, yani, your needs are met right within that however square radius, however yani, large that community or that area may be. Within that radius, you are able to find your needs. And so your money keeps flipping within that community over and over again before it actually leaves the community. Now, with us as Muslims being here in the US, it's incumbent upon us to have strong, viable communities, especially if we hope to instill within the children al-Islam without all the diversions and distractions that are here within the society today, without all the filth and corrupt ideologies, regardless of whatever they may be, that are found within the society today. If we're controlling the communities that we live, then we can consequently keep out a lot of that madness. We can keep out gang violence. And I don't want to just restrict it to gang violence, to like low-life thug type behavior, because we can also keep out the varying ideologies that are becoming prevalent within the society today that may be legal with the state and the feds, but with the law, it's illegal. With the law, it's illegal. And so I think that, and I believe that when looking at the situation of the Muslims here in the US, there has to be some type of priority in that regard. There has to be some type of priority in that regard. No. So one of the things that I want to take a look at when dealing with this particular issue, and there's a comment, Dr. Khalid Green has spoken about this. He has some land that's part of something that sounds pretty much on point with what you're saying. Now, I believe he has land in New Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's New Mexico, but I could be incorrect. We're in New Mexico, I'm not exactly sure. But at any rate, one of the things that comes up every year as it relates to, or not every year, but every so often when there's someone running for president. You have Muslims encouraging with participating in the voting process to vote in whoever, to vote in this one or that one from amongst the candidates that may be running. Vote this Democrat in or vote that Republican in. One of the things that has to be understood, and usually the things that are used is that, look, this is a threat, this is, this person would be of benefit for the Muslims in this regard or that regard, blah, 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 blah. Those are usually the statements that are thrown out there. And I'm pretty sure for all those that are watching, you've heard these things over and over and over and over again. Now, this particular, me bringing this up is not to go into is it permissible or impermissible to participate in that. What I'm basically stating concerning being involved in politics in that regard as it relates to calling people or calling the Muslims to get out and vote for this one or that one, that is a waste of the Muslims' time. That is a waste of the Muslims' time. Why? Because in reality, if we know the dynamics of America and we know what goes on with politicians, it really doesn't matter who's in office, a Democrat, neither a Democrat nor a Republican. It really doesn't matter who's in control. And this is something that scholarship here in America, when I mean scholarship, I'm not talking about Islamic scholars, I'm talking about kuffar that are scholars as it relates to political science and things of this nature. This is something that some of them have been echoing for years. One such individual would be Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Claude Anderson has been echoing this for years. It doesn't matter who's in power. It doesn't matter who's in control, who's in the White House or who's in control as it relates to local government. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? Because in a nutshell, these politicians can be bought. Legally, of course, they can be bought. And if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Claude Anderson was himself a former politician. Maybe I could look that up to find out exactly what his position was in government. I don't recall. I think he was in government during the Carter administration, but I could be mistaken. All right. But the bottom line, he eloquently breaks down how, in more than one speech of his, how voting for a Democrat or voting for a Republican is really pointless in reality. And I'll give an example shortly. But here's the real issue. There is no politician except that they're going to have some ideas with them that may be in accordance with Al-Islam, regardless if they be a liberal or conservative. However, there are going to be ideas that they have with them that contradict and conflict with Al-Islam as well. So there shouldn't be a agenda amongst the Muslims to be shoehorned into any of these political parties, into the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. There shouldn't be any push amongst the Muslims to have some type of allegiance to any of these two parties, because both of these two parties have that which is considered corruption with them in light of the divine guidance that has been revealed from above the seven heavens. So that needs to be understood from the very beginning. Second, when looking at this issue of it really doesn't matter who's in office, Democrat or Republican, then we want to look at policies that are popular with the American people. Why? Because the American people are spoon-fed over and over and over and over and over again that the popularity is what is going to win as it relates to the influence of policy. You have politicians that every year they campaign on certain, they make certain promises to do this and to do that. And then after they get in office, you don't see them fight for what they said they were going to fight for, or they don't vote accordingly. They don't vote in accordance with what they ran on. And so I'm gonna use a simple example. A simple example is Medicare for all. Medicare for all. Medicare for all is popular. I believe 70 or maybe 80% of the country favors Medicare for all, meaning for everybody, regardless of how old you are, how old, how young, whatever the case may be. Everybody gets it, right? And its popularity is among both the Democratic and Republican constituents. It crosses both party lines. And it's been something that has been talked about for over a decade. For over a decade. Yet, Medicare for all is still not law within the United States. Although politicians each election cycle after election cycle get up there and claim that they support that and they want that and that's what for so on. California, one of the most liberal states, the politicians were claiming that they were going to fight for that, and to this very day they still don't have that. Now the question would be, because this goes into what Dr. Claude Anderson has been speaking on as it relates to how to gain power. The question would be, why is it that it hasn't been voted on? Why is that the case? Well, in order for you to fully understand why it hasn't been voted on, is you have to look at who's in opposition to it. You have to look at who's in opposition to it, despite the fact that the majority of Americans want it. Without a doubt, the health insurance industry vehemently opposes it because they will go out of business overnight, basically. They will go out of business overnight. The pharmaceutical industry opposes it too, because it would then have control over the pricing of pharmaceutical drugs. These two entities these two entities alone are very powerful entities within the United States, and they stand to lose billions of dollars if a legislation like that was passed. So, with that being kept in mind, then if the American people, the majority of the American people want this, and this minority of people don't want it, how is it that this minority of people keep getting their way? They keep getting their way. Well, once you understand how they keep getting their way, you'll understand that voting doesn't really mean anything, and it doesn't really matter who's in office, regardless if it's a Democrat or a Republican, because both parties are in the back pockets of both these industries. And that is, the way they keep getting their way is by way of a method called buying access. Buying access. In other words, if you want to know why a politician votes the way he votes, then all you have to do is check for his donors. Who are his donors or contributors to his campaigns? And you'll find, once you start tracing the money, you'll find that that politician usually votes in favor of whose assisting him or her financially, who's assisting him or her financially. And so this is why it is just a fool's errand to attempt to get the Muslims to participate in voting, because your vote really doesn't matter anyway. The politicians are going to lie to you and tell you that they're going to fight for this and fight for that. And then when they get in office, they fight for other than that. This happens every election cycle. And so I'm giving the Muslims that may be listening a different perspective to view this outside of what you may normally hear, that it's a waste of time. And so when dealing with this particular issue of how to really gain power in a society, then, and this is going outside of the economic perspective, but if you're talking about a political perspective, there's only really one way, and that's buying access. That's buying access. That way, whoever wins, it doesn't really matter. They're in your back pocket. So whatever demands that you have, they're going to strive to make your demands a reality. And that's what's been taking place within this country for Allah knows best how long. All you got to do is just check the popular policies amongst the American people and look at what has been stalled or stagnated for decades, and then look at who opposes it. And you'll see the reality of who really has power and who doesn't. Who really has power and who doesn't. So this is important if you're talking about establishing viable communities. Why? Because from a local level, to a degree, you're going to have to deal with politicians to a degree. It doesn't mean every single Muslim within the community has to deal with them, but whoever the leadership is, in order to get things done as it relates to policies or regardless of what it may be, as it relates to zoning or whatever is needed in order to establish that Islamic community from the bottom to the top. You're going to have to most likely deal with politicians eventually in one way or another, just like every other group of people has to deal with them to some degree or another. So the point that I'm making is, from a communal perspective, that is in reality how you gain power to move the needle, for lack of better expressions, on things from a legal perspective, seeing things change from a legal perspective, and Allah knows best. Of course, when dealing with the community or building a community, it's going to take group economics from amongst the Muslims, but with that, in order for that to come to fruition, everybody's going to have to be on the same page. Everybody's going to have to be on the same page, or a group of brothers are going to have to be on the same page. Everybody may not necessarily see the gold in what may be proposed, but like-minded individuals who do see the gold in that which is being proposed, and they have to come together and attempt to make things happen, and hope that when things start to become accomplished, that others will join in with their resources and their know-how to pull the to assist in bringing the goal to fruition. So that's how it relates to community, and that's been on my mind ever since the last election cycle, where Muslims were bringing certain fatwas and things of this nature, and I was scratching my head like, man, why are people acting as if voting really matters? And as if that's how power is obtained in America. A lot of that stuff is just tokenism. And if we really want to get down to the nitty gritty, as it relates to all of this. Okay, we could look at the Black community. Take the Black community as an example. Look how many politicians the Black community has gotten on back of, and the economic situation of Black folks in America is exactly the same as it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, thus forth and so on. The wealth gap, and all of these things that they talk about every election cycle. Everything has remained the same. Everything is stagnant. Look how many Black politicians are in office, and everything's remaining the same. The only thing that you see that is a difference is in what they call cultural issues. So a Confederate flag is now illegal to fly in government buildings or whatever the case may be, but yet the economy of the people still remains the same. They really haven't benefited at all from a Confederate flag being removed from a government building. Their economical situation is still the same. There hasn't been an improvement in that regard. So I'm giving this as an example with the hopes to jog the understanding of the believers that that isn't what really aids, unless you're just looking for a bunch of cultural victories, cultural tokenism, a law on lynchings now being a federal crime, okay? But there was already laws on the books against that. So these examples are being brought with the hopes that people understand the point that I'm trying to make, and Allah knows best. And the Muslims have to have a plan. It doesn't make sense to be hobnobbing with these politicians and there's no plan. What's the point of hobnobbing with these people and there's no demands being made of them to change this law, that law in favor of the Muslims? There will be no point to even be around them. They're not. What's the point? So that's from a community perspective. In a nutshell, the reason why all this is being brought up is that we have to think outside of the box and see the realities for what they are, and not live in a sugar-coated topping of the world based off, and not be riled up by people that sugarcoat reality and have us believing and or thinking something is what it is not. Something is what it is not. Like, for instance, when that one election cycle came around and you saw a lot of people pushing for voting. I think it was one of those times Donald Trump was running. And no, he can't get in office and this and that. He's going to do this and do that, and they're pushing for that. But the reality, it doesn't matter if Joe Biden is in office or Donald Trump is in office. It really doesn't matter. And in reality, for us as Muslims, we should be trying to do things from more of a local government perspective anyway, if we have to even deal with those people. If we have to deal with them. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. There's a difference between the federal and the state government. But anyway, that's as it relates to the communal, that which is considered to be communal as it relates to gaining power and establishing communities and thus forth and so on. Now, as it relates to individuals, this portion of what I want to talk about was inspired by a talk that I had with our elder Abdul Hafiz Abu Ayyash, the Imam of Masjid Mukbil, because I have been dealing with issues on polygyny at the time I had this conversation with him. And it caused me to ask a question, because we know on average, the average earner in the US is making between like $30,000 and $60,000. And depending on where you may be in the US, cost of living is can be pretty expensive depending on where you at in the U.S. So I asked the brother, I said, listen, man, how are the brothers in Philly financially able to provide for more than one wife? Because Philly's not a cheap place to live. And I'm pretty sure, the brothers are average workers, making maybe 30, 40, or between 40 and $50,000, and that's what for so on. So he responded, he said a lot of sisters that go into polygyny, he stated that a lot of these sisters have their situation together, financially speaking. He said some sisters may even own their own home. From however they got it, if they inherited it or they worked for it, they went to college and they have credentials that enables them to get a very high paying job. We have some sisters that are making, if not $100,000, are pretty close to $100,000 a year. So, he made mention of that, and he stated that, a lot of these sisters, they just want upright husbands. They want upright husbands, and they're not necessarily concerned with them earning much, much less than them. And so, I reflected off that after talking with the brother, because I said to myself that could be problematic in the future. A lot of women, if they had their choice, they don't really want to be in the workplace. A lot of sisters really don't want to be in the workplace. They're in the workplace because they have to be in the workplace. They're single sisters in America. Cost of living is high and increasing due to inflation. So the women are forced to, obtain credentials and go out and obtain jobs. And for those that start their own businesses, you have sisters that do that. But the reality is, a lot of sisters, if they had their choice, they wouldn't be working. And at some point, they'll be tired of working. And so when you have brothers that go into situations like that, then it's incumbent upon that brother, especially if he has two wives at work as well, it's incumbent upon that brother to come up with a plan, to come up with some type of plan that would enable him to be a better provider. And if he has a wife or wives that are making much, much more than him, then he wants to make sure that he has his wives on board with whatever his plan is to assist him in pulling off that plan by Allah's permission, because that will be a benefit not only for him, but it'll be a benefit for them as well. Especially if you have women, just straight up, most of them, they're going to say, most women, and I'm speaking as it relates to the majority. You may have an anomaly here and there, but most women, if you would probably ask them, listen, do you really want to work, or if your husband was able, would you rather be at home? Most likely, a lot of women are going to say they'd rather be at home. If there's any sisters that are listening to this, I'm pretty sure you all would agree with me when I make that statement. But if anyone disagrees with me, they can put it in the chat and state why they disagree. The point that I'm making is that, generally speaking, that would be the case. So for brothers that are in situations like this, then I would encourage these types of brothers to come up with a plan while they have wives that are in situations like that, come up with a plan, and all three of you all pour your resources into pulling off that plan. Because with three people working together in that regard, and the reason why I say this is because me dealing with brothers, like recently, I threw out to some brothers that of a plan I had, and I still have, and I stated that whoever has 20 grand, all I need is basically five brothers, well, actually four, and then myself, that have 20 grand, and we can start this business. We'll have more resources amongst us. Each of us has that. That's 100,000 that we can invest into this particular business. And one brother actually called me and talked to me about it. And I gave him the details, the rundown as it relates to what I was trying to do. But the way that I sent it out to the brothers, nobody really responded. Everybody's on their own individual thing. Everybody's on their own individual thing. And individualism is not going to get us anywhere. It's going to take group economics. And so because you have brothers with this idea headed in that direction and this idea headed in that direction, then it may be time for brothers to take a united family approach, especially if they have women folk that are working and that are making decent or good money. It may be time to take a family approach to improving the economics. The statement is, that's very sad. I read that post and was very happy. I'm not sure what post you're referring to at the moment. At any rate, the point that I'm making is it may be the family, the brother along with his wives may have to come together. If that man has a plan, it may be time to involve your wives and bring them on board, and with whatever finances you have and whatever finances that they have to contribute to that they all contribute. And as a family, you try and bring that goal to fruition. Well, how does that benefit? That benefits because if that man is successful in what it is he's trying to do, and he builds up wealth by way of whatever it is that he's trying to do, then that preference of those sisters to not want to work could consequently bring that to fruition. It could consequently bring that to fruition. If that man is successful in his goals and in his plan, then it could bring to fruition them not having to work now, because he's raised himself up to a level where he himself can provide for both households and there isn't an issue and or a problem. Why? Because he's making the type of money now to where he can do that. So I think that when brothers go in and sisters go into polygyny, or brothers and sisters that have been in polygyny for years, that if you all are not looking at this, what I just mentioned, if you're not looking at the marriage in that manner of how you can raise your family up by working as a family unit, you might want to start to look into that, because unfortunately we have too much individualism amongst the brothers. This is the reality. We have too much individualism amongst the brothers. Regardless, and I'm not here to really try and discuss why it's like that. We know some brothers have tried to work with. I know a couple of brothers in LA that tried to work with other brothers in other places. Like one brother put $20,000 down or $30,000 down with a brother from outside of LA and got burned. and got burned, ripped off, you know, and in fact, more than one brother. In fact, more than one brother. So to a degree, there is some skepticism amongst brothers because of that, and there may be other reasons. There may be other reasons. But my advice would be that if brothers are going to get with brothers you have a background with, you've had a background with for years. And the reality is, if those types of brothers that you trust, that you actually trust, if they're too busy doing whatever it is that they're doing, then it may have to come time to move in as a family. The family move as one unit in bringing about a betterment for the economic situation of the family. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I don't believe a lot of us think like that. I don't believe that a lot of us think like that. And so, like I said, this is action-provoking dialogue. This is action-provoking dialogue. So it's hoped that a man with two wives may hear this and may say to himself, yeah, why haven't I got my wives on board with what I'm trying to do with this and that, and we just come together and put our resources all together on this project that'll help me elevate financially, that'll put them in a situation where they don't have to be working. Some brothers may hear this and say, I never really thought about that. And this is what I mean by action-provoking dialogue. This type of dialogue, we want to spark the conversation amongst the Muslims as it relates to actually getting things done. Keeping a dialogue as simple as possible, not complicating it, not trying to sound real academic and things of this nature to the point where things just go over people's heads. We don't have time for that. We don't have time for people trying to sound overly intellectual or overly academic. We need to get stuff done. We need to get stuff done. If we're looking around in the States, man, if you're just saving money right now, your money is becoming more and more devalued because of inflation. So that money needs to be taken and invested into something with the hopes that it brings back some type of viable return. Some type of viable return. Before you have 20 grand, and in 2 or 3 years, the spending power of 20 grand would be like 10 grand right now. 30 years ago, if you had 20 grand, you could have started a business with just that. Now you need more investment capital than 20 grand for a lot of different businesses, and thus for so on. The main point is that we as Muslims, we have to, especially the Muslim, we Ahl Sunnah, we need to become a little bit more business orientated and business minded, because wealth is a means to be able to accomplish upright goals. And if we don't have it, we won't be able to pull off the things that are necessary in order to see Allah's deen uppermost. We can't exclude obtaining wealth from the discussion. And it's not obtaining wealth to be like what is promoted in the red pill movement, this fake masculinity, smoking cigarettes and driving fast cars. And we're not talking about that in order to be crazy in love with the dunya. None of this is being brought up for that. No, it's being brought up for one, to be better providers and maintainers for our immediate situation, our families, and then two, to be better contributors to the community. Because when we go into the inner city and or urban areas, these are some of the most underfunded masajid in America. We will go into the rural areas where the income threshold is a lot higher. You find some of the most immaculate masajid in America. They're funded. Right? But unfortunately, with all that funding, there's another component that's missing, and that is because that component of a rightly guided teacher or teachers being within those communities. But that's another discussion. It's connected to this issue, but it's another discussion. Whereas in the inner cities, when you go to the masajid of Ahlul Sunnah, you may have a rightly guided teacher or teachers therein, but because of lack of finances, there's only so much that could be done. And so, especially when we go into the inner city and or urban areas, where the people are predominantly Black and Latino, you'll find that there's all types of things, all types of institutes that will benefit the community that need to be established. And this is as it relates to our children and other than them, from adults that may need things. Like, for instance, in Philadelphia, you have homeless sisters, homeless for whatever reason. The reasons vary, they differ. But the only shelters, most of the shelters, from what I was told some years back, were run by the churches, the Catholics. And so you have a Muslimah in a shelter being run by the Catholics. So with that being the case, you would think that the Muslims would say, okay, we need to come up with something that services the needs of our sisters in that regard, so they don't have to run to those types of places for aid and assistance. And there should be all types of shelters and or transitional homes for both brothers and sisters in that city. And not just that city, but in all, Detroit to Newark to LA to wherever else, these things should be in play. But guess what? In order to bring those things to fruition to a degree, it's going to take money. It's going to take other things, other factors as well. But money is one of the means needed to be able to bring that to fruition. And so, again, you cannot take economics outside of the equation when trying to establish an Islamic village and gain control of an area and actually make it a community. You can't have these discussions and exclude some type of wealth building from that discussion. Why? Because wealth is a means to be able to accomplish some of these goals. Wealth is a means to be able to accomplish some of these goals. So from an individual perspective, then for those that are in polygyny, that have more than one wife, and there's situation or circumstances like that, a sister married a brother, she's financially stable, she just wanted a good husband, and that's what for so on. Then if I was a brother in that type of situation, do you want to develop a plan and approach your wives as a family? Like, listen, this is the family goal. This should be the family goal. This should be the family goal. While they're in a situation where Allah is having them obtain, Allah is providing for them in that regard, and take advantage of that to better the family situation in general. And then you may even have sisters who are single, who who desire marriage, and they have a mentality that in the locality that they're at, they don't see suitable men who are single. So if these types of sisters are considering polygyny, they might want to consider asking, okay, is this the type of man that is on that type of page, the page of wealth building as it relates to working as a family to better the family financial situation, so that she doesn't have to work. She or her co-wife or future co-wife don't have to work, and thus forth and so on. And so that was on my mind based off of that conversation that I had with the elder Abdul Hafid, Hafidhullah. And I don't believe any of those two things are talked about, because if you surf through the varying callers who have, I don't know if it's talked about. I was going to say one thing, but the brother mentioned Khalid Green, and he mentioned that Khalid Green talked about something similar to what I was saying. So again, I don't keep up with a lot of the du'a on social media like that. So I honestly don't know what a lot of people are talking about, to be quite honest. If it's being talked about, alhamdulillah, it's hope that the people really take heed to what's being said and make beneficial moves in that regard. There's some other topics that I wanted to talk about, but I don't really have the time, but I will touch on this topic. And this particular topic is just, I see this quite often. I don't want to say from a lot of people, but I've seen it often enough, where, especially when it comes, there are people that constantly question the level of knowledge of callers here in the US and try to place callers into a box of incompetence. And I'll mention why I say that. Recently, there's a brother named Bilal. He's the one that runs the Features YouTube channel. He put together a video, or he edited a video titled "Question for Najeeb Al Anjelesi," or something to that effect. I don't recall if that was exactly the way it was worded, but it was something to this effect: question to Najeeb Al Anjelesi. And the question that he asked was a clear question, and it wasn't a question that was he wasn't asking for a fatwa. He was asking a general question about a rudimentary issue in fiqh. A rudimentary issue in fiqh. When I say a rudimentary issue in fiqh, meaning you can go to rudimentary books of fiqh and find the answer to what he was asking, at least in the Arabic language. I don't know about books that have been translated in English, but in the Arabic language, like the book Al-Fiqh Al-Muyassir, and that would be translated as simplified fiqh. So he asked a question concerning when divorce is considered to be wajib. That's a general question, which would necessitate a theoretical ruling on the issue, right? He wasn't asking for a fatwa as it relates to a specific situation that was taking place. He just asked a general question, right? And so I was on a social media platform and I saw a discussion arise where a person was basically questioning my level of knowledge and claiming that this type of question shouldn't be posed to me. This should be posed to a scholar of high caliber, or someone of knowledge of higher caliber uh, than myself. First and foremost, I'm not a scholar. So when I say than myself, I mean someone who's of higher knowledge than me, right? And the person was saying scholar. This should be taken to a scholar. But the brother wasn't asking. He wasn't asking for a fatwa. That's one. And then two, his question was very clear, and you can find the answer in the rudimentary books of fiqh. And another brother, entered the discussion, and he wasn't on the same page as the initial brother, but it became a real long back and forth. And the bottom line, the point that I'm making is, when I read that, I said to myself, why is this brother attempting to say what I'm capable of or incapable of? One, you don't know me. Two, the person asked a very simple question. Anybody that is aware of these issues knows that that's a rudimentary issue. He was asking about the theoretical rulings on a theoretical ruling, like when is divorce obligatory, right? And the reason why, when I read that, I said to myself, this happens quite often, where I don't know if the brother who was saying that is actually somebody who studied or not, but the name that was attached to the name, I never heard of him. But this happens quite often, that you find people attempting to put callers that are involved in dawah, put them into a box of incompetence, to the point where you basically you're not qualified to answer anything. Anything rudimentary, you're not qualified to answer. Now, I did a response video to the brother's question, and just as it was asked as a general question, I answered it generally. Now, I want to say that when it comes to what I mentioned in that particular video, those are theoretical rulings. If a specific situation comes up, or a specific couple falls into disputing like this, and a fatwa is needed, then yeah, you take that back to a scholar. I'm not from the people of Fatawa, and none of the callers that I know of in America are from the people of Fatawa that I can think of at the moment. So the point is, if you're looking for a fatwa, then yeah, you want to take that back to a scholar. But the callers in the US are capable of answering questions of that nature. And I don't understand why people are attempting to put callers into the box of incompetence as it relates to dealing with simple general questions. Simple general questions. And, it shows, to me, it shows the su'dhan that the people have for certain callers. And I understand how that's probably come about because of people that attribute nobility to themselves and have caused all types of problems for the last decade. Mashes being split, all in the name of minhaj, quoting things and misapplying them, that's for so on. Those types of people have proven themselves to be incompetent. They have proven themselves to be incompetent because they cause more harm than benefit. When you got the ranks of Ahl Sunnah split all about, you know, and when you look at the criticisms that are being made against certain people, there's some deception or some kadhib or the procedures needed to be able to warn against or declare someone this or that weren't followed, and that's what for so on. So those are people that are incompetent, but judge those people based off their actions, what they've done, what they've put forth. But people who have not displayed that, then reserve your judgment. Then hold back your judgment. Don't view them the same way as these other people. Because now I see, I'm not saying this is with the majority of people, but there is an element of people that seem to have su'ban for the callers and place the callers in a box of incompetence, like you can't answer nothing. You don't know, he don't know. I did a video over a year ago, I believe by now, that was dealing with the difference between a Sahih and a Hasan hadith. And I had a comment, it was a comment that was made where a person basically was putting me in a box of incompetence. Like what am I doing? What was I doing to be talking about Mustalah al-Hadith? Although I studied it. In fact, there are things that callers have studied, walillah alhamd, that we won't ever be able to teach anybody here in the U.S. based off the level. Generally speaking, we might not ever be able to teach anybody based off the level of the people, generally speaking, that are here. Based off the level of the people that are here. And Allah knows best. And Allah knows best. But this seems to happen too often where people are putting people in the box of incompetence. Listen, whenever somebody doesn't know something, just simply say, I don't know. But if a question is asked and we've studied the issue, it's okay for us to answer the question. And for anybody that's studied, you can pretty much tell when another person that's involved in dawah opens their mouth, you can pretty much tell if he knows what he's talking about or not. Because you've studied the issue too, you have an awareness of the issue too, and so you're able to determine if the person is talking in opposition to the mas'ala or in accordance with the haqq as it relates to the mas'ala or the issue or the affair, generally speaking. You know, so I just find that I found that strange, you know. And I think that the brothers and sisters need to have more husna dhan for brothers involved in dawah. And Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala knows best. Anyway, I need to get some rest. Like I said, I'll be traveling in the morning, or sometime in the morning, inshallah. So I definitely want to get some rest. And with that, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Hopefully, what was presented tonight will spark the conversation amongst people as it relates to what was mentioned. And I hope that, you know, I just haven't been talking for an hour and I've just been wasting my time. I'm hoping that hopefully this discussion will bear some fruit. And with that, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.